Most pumps absolutely break down when you try to pump stones with them, but not concrete pumps. Concrete pumps pump stones all day, every day. And because of that, we're going to see if it can pump a tiny camera. This is the DJI Osmo Nano, and DJI also sponsored this video. At least, we hope so. At this moment, we don't know yet, but we're just trying it.
Welcome to No Art, I'm Aldo, and today we're learning about pumps. There are two problems when you want to pump a liquid that has stones inside. The first is that having any two surfaces meet is hard when there's stones in between. This is a problem for any type of pump that opens and closes a chamber. This particular pump is from an air compressor and it uses a reciprocating piston with two valves. And here you can see the valves. They are simply thin metal flaps that open when pressure is higher on one side and close when the pressure is higher on the other. There are two. One to let air in when the pressure inside of the cylinder is lower than the ambient air pressure, and one to let the air out of the cylinder when it is higher than the pressure in the pressure tank. But yes, anything that's not a fluid messes up the opening and closing of these flaps. You might get rid of the valves and invent a screw pump where the liquid is sectioned off between the threads, the pump body and the other screw. It's a really neat design, but a stone would still get jammed in between the screws or at the entrance. There are also fans like centrifugal fans, which I will talk about in another video. They actually could fix the first issue of stones getting stuck between parts, but they can't make high enough pressures exactly because there are no closed chambers. With enough back pressure, the fluid just flows back. So for real-world concrete pumps, they did choose a piston pump, but they use a different type of valve. A concrete pump has a hopper where the mixer truck dribbles in the concrete. The hopper has its own little mixer and two open-ended cylinders at the bottom. This pipe here is what they call an S-valve, and it's where the concrete is pushed out of the machine. The S-valve swings from one cylinder to the other. The piston in the open cylinder moves back and lets in some concrete, while the piston in the other cylinder pushes it into the S-valve. And then the S-valve switches sides and the cycle repeats itself. Weep, whoop, weep, whoop. This S-valve isn't much of a valve, to be honest. It's just connecting and disconnecting a pipe over and over and over again. I wouldn't say it happens manually because the machine does it by itself, but it has to be done with a hydraulic cylinder every time. It doesn't just happen by the pressure itself, like it does on many other valves. The concrete even has the ability to flow back a little bit when the S-valve is switching sides. At one point, there will be a connection from the outlet to the cylinder to the hopper. So yeah, this is one of the most rudimentary types of valves you can possibly imagine. However, that's with good reason. When I first had the idea for this video, I actually hoped that it would be some kind of smart mechanism that actually got rid of the problem entirely of stones getting stuck between something. Like, one of the ways I thought they would minimize it is by pushing the piston all the way right up to the very edge of the plate the S-valve slides on. That way there are no edges for the stones to catch against. That maybe seems like a great idea, but that doesn't solve the problem on the other side. So they just don't fix the problem. They just crush the stones with the hydraulic cylinder that moves the S-valves. And I didn't know that when I thought about putting a camera through it. It's a little bit disappointing that it's not a super smart mechanism, but it makes sense. This solution is made to be stronger than the strongest part in the concrete, instead of relying on things to go exactly as planned. The only downside is that sand and broken stones wear down metal quite fast. On this machine you can already see that there are big gaps. This one should be changed soon. They do that every X amount of operating hours, and that's okay. You can plan for that and you can design the machine in such a way that there are wear parts in the first place and that they are easy to replace. There's also the piston itself, of course.
This piece of an O-ring is the actual piston head. Normally on a piston there's O-ring and another O-ring and then a spacer that keeps it in the center. This is all in one basically, and it lasts a year in concrete.
It has fiber reinforcements and everything. They told me it's quite a hard balance to get the concrete mix right. You want a long working time on the concrete, which means that it takes a long time for it to become hard, because you don't want it to get hard in your mixing truck or even worse, inside of the pump. One way to do that is by lowering the amount of cement in the concrete. But with too little cement in the mix, you can literally press the water out of the concrete and separate out the stones because of the high pressures in the pump. And then you get clogs and stone nests, as they call it, and all kinds of problems. So you want to add more cement, then it pumps better, but then you have a shorter time to work with it. Anyway, even though this idea of putting things through the pump might be a little bit more risky than I thought, let's do it!
I think I want to first put this camera inside with a suction cup to film the other object, and then we're gonna go for the camera.
My friends at Linus Tech Tips sent over some of their stuff to put through the concrete pump,
Because at the time of filming with the pump, I didn't have any merch myself. Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
nice.
first up, the cap.
the cap floated on the water, so that wouldn't work.
First, precision screwdriver.
That's probably gonna sink to the bottom.
Yeah, I see you.
Yeah.
The camera fell.
The camera fell. I obviously should have used the magnets that are inside of the camera instead of the suction cup, because that surface I was putting it on was quite rough and worn away by all the concrete.
Screwdriver sinks, so we put it in its own box, and now I'm gonna tape it shut. Hopefully then it's like kind of the same density as water, so it actually gets sucked in.
Now it's sunk to the bottom again. And I think it's broken.
It's broken. Oh, part one. Oh.
That does not bode well for the camera. Let's see if we can get the process down with the stubby screwdriver. Here we are running the pump in reverse, because then the screwdriver is in the pipe already and the sinking problem hopefully isn't that big of a deal. And we lost it in the machine.
It's somewhere in a down spot, because like it sinks, so, and it doesn't have enough speed to actually carry it out of the machine, so it's like somewhere in the bottom. There it is. Still ratcheting. I know a safe way, and let's just put it in the cylinder and then turn it on. Just forward, regular.
De base is wel een beveiliging, hè?
No, he got us.
Stuck in the bottom again, even though we put it into the cylinder from the start. So now we're going to use the cap as a ball.
A ball? Yes, a ball.
This ball is maybe the most important part of the machine, or even though it's not part of the machine. When they're done, they need to get the concrete out, because it will become hard no matter what. So they put this ball in the pipe, and it pushes all the concrete out.
All right, time for the camera. So it's like two parts, and this can just be its standalone mini camera that's super light, which you can put in all kinds of tiny places. I put a little LED bicycle light on there because, of course, it's dark inside of the pump, and that's it, just a tiny camera having the time of its life. It can record in 4K 120 FPS or even 240 FPS in 1080p, which is what I did. Those are crazy numbers for such a tiny device. This time we put a proper foam bowl in first, and then the camera in front of that, so that the camera would be pushed out no matter what.
Gaat die andere camera drijven of niet?
Nee, die...
Hij houdt hem er gewoon uit.
Eraf zonder baan. Ja.
50-50. 50-50, it survives.
Maakt niet uit.
Ja, maar dan loopt hij leeg.
All right. It went through. Not a stretch.
We actually did it a second time because I forgot to slow motion. First, you see the water coming in. If we used concrete, we wouldn't have many of the floating or sinking issues we had, but then again, we wouldn't be able to see anything. Here the camera flips up, so now we're looking at the top of the cylinder with the outside air here on the bottom left. This is the actual cylinder on the right, and this part here is the wear plate we talked about. On the right, we can see a very faint orange glow. That's the foam ball that will push us through. Alright, here we go. First, we are sucked further into the cylinder, and you'll see a bit more of the orange ball. And now we're being pushed out, past the scissor point in the S-valve, and then we stop, right on a seam. This is where the S-valve rotates and is connected to the rest of the piping. You can actually see it move. Super nice. Then we're pushed further. Strangely enough, here you can see some orange on the wrong side. This is actually a section of a ball that we used earlier, which was cut in half. Apparently it was still in there. Then the water goes cloudy, and we get stuck against that half section of the ball right before we would exit the pipe, but we were able to pull it out. DJI is in such a league of their own that they are not as worried about competitors as they are about fakes. So make sure you buy through DJIusa.com, and if you already bought yours, you can verify it with the serial number on DJI's official website. Use promo code DJI-Aldo to get 1% off any DJI product at checkout, which also tells them I sent you. The DJI Osmo Pocket 3 and Osmo Nano are insanely versatile cameras, and I'll show you throughout the video what fun shots can be made with them, with the name of the camera it's shot on in one of the corners. There are a few more pumps to cover. First, one of the most elegant designs, the rotary vane pump.
These are often used in the power steering of cars. But this specific one is from a vacuum pump.
Just a thick shaft with some amount of vanes on it. In this case, two. And that shaft is just inside another circle with some holes in it. But the trick, it's not centered, and the vanes have a spring in them. So as it rotates, they move out and in and out and in and out. The cavity between them first gets bigger, lowering the pressure, letting air in. Then the next vane comes by and closes the chamber, and then it starts compressing until it's higher than ambient pressure and it's pushed out again. In theory, you don't even need these springs, because centrifugal forces will fling the vanes outwards. For a second, I even thought that you might get away with one solid vane that acts on both sides, but because it's not centered, that doesn't work. It's smaller here than here. Anyway, on to the next. Peristaltic pumps. Just push a piece of tubing together and the section moves around the pump and comes out the other end. This is honestly kind of similar to how you would milk a cow and how our intestines move stuff through them. A constriction that moves along a tube. It's very useful for two things. The first is pumping exact amounts of liquid. If you measure how much comes out after 10 rotations, you know that the next 10 rotations will pump almost exactly the same amount. But the more common reason to use these pumps over other types of pumps is that the liquid stays inside of the tube and doesn't touch anything else. This is good for very reactive things that would destroy the pump, or for things that need to stay clean, like food or blood. Peristaltic pumps are quite popular in medical use cases. Even though it might feel like it should, winding the tube further around the head doesn't make it pump more fluid per rotation. Neither does adding more rollers to the head. But adding more rollers does help with the maximum pressure the pump can put out, because any leakage under this roller also needs to press out liquid from the next chamber, etc, etc. This only works if leakage is the problem and not the power of the motor, of course.
Adding more rollers decreases the lifespan of the tube because it's squeezed down more often per unit of pumped volume.
But the tube should actually be super easy to replace. You can even use different diameters of tubing on the same pump as long as the wall thickness is the same, because it's pressed flat, so the wall thickness determines if it seals or not. I'm sure some of you will find that very helpful for fine-tuning the flow rate of your aquarium or whatever. Gear pumps are amazingly simple and robust if you need a high pressure source of liquid. Often used in hydraulic systems, it's simply two meshing gears inside of a very snug housing. Oil enters here and is transported through the sides. Then at the end, the gears mesh together, pressing all the oil out between the teeth. It's such a simple design because one gear drives the other, and in a hydraulic system, it oils itself. and it can create very high pressures. Like many other pumps on this list, it will destroy itself or blow out a connection or an O-ring somewhere if the oil has nowhere to go. That's why there should always be a relief valve on any hydraulic system, so make sure that when the pressure gets too high, the flow is just diverted into the reservoir again without making noises that are too expensive. You can hear it quite well when the cylinders reach the end of their stroke or when the machine does something that it's not meant to do. Another super duper elegant design is the scroll compressor. It's two spirals or scrolls, one of which is moving in circles, not rotating mind you, moving in circles. And this creates air pockets that are brought around and around and around and slowly compressed, and then in the middle they can come out. A hard detail to get right is moving one of the scrolls in circles while not rotating it. Often they use an eccentric shaft on which the scroll is free to spin, and then to prevent the scroll from rotating, a so-called Aldo coupling is used, where there are perpendicular grooves in the housing of the machine and in the scroll plate. So one set of grooves goes vertical while another goes horizontal, and in these grooves sits a ring with lugs on both sides. The scroll can move on top of the ring in one direction, and the ring can move on top of the housing together with the scroll in the other direction. That way, the scroll can move in any direction without rotating. But there's another way to fix this problem, which I think is even more elegant, but it's hard to wrap your head around exactly, and that's to rotate both scrolls simultaneously around two different points. If you look at these center points and draw a small circle to the end points of the scrolls, you see that they circle around their center points, and the mechanism is timed in such a way that they are both in the middle at the same time and at the outsides at the same time, so they come closer and move further apart time after time. And the same thing happens all around the spiral, of course. This is very elegant, but I believe it's also mostly theoretical because it's incredibly hard to drive these scrolls like that. So most scroll pumps are made with an Oldham coupling. They're often used in air conditioners and things like that. They're very compact and have relatively low vibration. An axial cam pump or an axial piston pump or a wobble plate pump is another lovely design. Actually my favorite, I think. There are a bunch of pistons in the circular cylinder block, as I would call it, and it rotates. And then there is an angled plate to which the pistons are mounted, making them go up and down as they rotate. Between the inlet and the outlet, there's just enough space for the piston to fit without connecting them at any point. This space cannot be too large because then you'd get cavitation or overpressure because the piston will try to pump while the fluid has nowhere to go. There's often a very small slit on the valve plate to fix this problem and to smooth out the transition. These pumps have a wonderful trick up their sleeve. On some models, the swash plate can move. With higher angles, the pistons have a longer stroke, but when the plate is flat, they don't move at all. So that way, you can change the flow and how much torque you need on the shaft to make a certain pressure. This makes them very useful for places where they are driven at a relatively constant speed, while they need to vary their output quite a lot, like on excavators, and I believe they're also used on airplanes, but also like on simpler stuff like a pressure washer. Another super neat thing about this type of pump is that it can run in reverse, and not just like run in reverse, no, I mean that you can power it with hydraulic fluid and get rotation. It can be a hydraulic motor. I do have to mention that the same goes for some other types of pumps like the vane pump and the gear pump, but whatever. The homework for today's video is to look in the real world for the weirdest thing that could be considered a pump. Take a video of it and make your case in the Discord chat as to why we could theoretically consider it a pump. Doesn't matter if you see this video in a year from now, we're just having some fun. Thanks to RVR Concrete Pump Rentals for having us over. Thanks to all my patrons and all the merch buyers, it helps out a lot. Thanks to DJI for sponsoring this video. Use code DJI Aldo to get 1% off, and I'll see you in the next video.